Hey guys, Kate and I'm Master here, and I'm gonna do another collection video here today. This time I'm actually doing a little bit different. I'm gonna go over both my PS1 and PS2 collection together instead of separately. One reason is that individually my PS2 and PS1 collections aren't. My PS1 collection alone and my PS2 collection alone aren't nearly as big as my GameCube collection on its own, my Wii collection on its own, my N64 on its own. And also it's because I never owned an original PS1. My first experiences with the PS1 were when we got our PS2 in Christmas of 2001. So so I kind of experienced both libraries together. So it was Christmas of 2000, Christmas, the holiday season of 2001. Christmas was coming up. And my brother, I really wanted a GameCube for Christmas, but my brother really wanted a PS2. So we each ended up I ended up getting a GameCube. My brother got a PS2. Well, my dad also really wanted a PS2 because the big draw for the PS2 was that it was the cheapest DVD player available at the time. At that point, I think the PS2 was down to about $200. So, anyways, this is my PS2. Obviously, this is not the console we got for Christmas that year, that my brother got. He Because this is the PS2 Slim model. Obviously, we originally had the original fat PS2 model, as I like to call it. That one later broke, and we replaced it with the Slim model. Now, this is not the Slim model that they bought. This is actually my own PS2 that I bought around 2013, 2014 after my brother went off to college. Since the PS2 was his, he brought it with him, so I ended up buying my own. In addition to getting a GameCube and Luigi's Mansion for Christmas, I also got a PS2 game, which was Test Drive Off-Road Wide Open. I never really played it a lot. I remember doing the practice mode a lot and just driving around the various environments that were available without doing any racing. And my brother and I really enjoyed just messing around in the practice mode, but like we never really got into it, and I eventually traded it into Blockbuster. When my brother got the PS2 for Christmas, not only did that give us the ability to play the PS2 games, that also gave us the ability to play the entire PS1 library. So that gave us the option to rent GameCube, Nintendo 64, PS1, PS2 games, since at the time we had GameCube, PS2, and Nintendo 64. The first game I ever bought for PS1, what might not be the first one, but the first one that I still have, was Digimon World 3. I don't have the original box. Unfortunately, the original case, the original jewel case I had broke. That was one of the things that sucked about the PS1 cases. They were not well put together and they broke easily. So I gave it this plain clear plastic jewel case to put the game into. This actually came out after the PS2 was released. This came out in 2002. So this had everything from took influence from the first three seasons, and then previews for season 4 Pokemon like Agunimon, Kendogurumon, Ancient Greymon. But I played this game a lot. Really liked playing as the different Digimon, although the Digivolution system was kind of weird, because what you would do is if, let's say, because you get a starter set of three rookie Digimon, and let's say you choose the starter set of Patamon, Renamon, and Kotemon. Patamon, not only does he, by leveling him up, do you have access to the Digivolutions that you're well aware of, like Angemon, Magna Angemon, Seraphimon. You also have access to all these other Digivolutions like Digitamamon. You could have access to a bunch of different Digivolutions through this entire web just from one Digimon. Pretty much any Digimon, as far as I could tell, could potentially digivolve into any Digimon if you did enough level grinding. But that was the thing. This game was full of so much level grinding. I've only beaten this game once. Pretty much the majority of the game is spent level grinding. That is the biggest issue with this game. But it really was the best Digimon RPG game for a long time. Up until Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth on the PS4, which I think far surpasses this. But still, it was a very fun game. I also had the original Digimon Rumble Arena game on PS1, but that it was my brother's copy. He was the one who bought it, and he later traded it in, as he was expected. As I've established in previous collection videos, my brother really got obsessed with trading in games once he was finished playing through them. So he traded in a lot of his games that he didn't play anymore, including Digimon Rumble Arena. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, obviously huge at the time, although later games definitely surpassed it. This was pretty much the definitive Tony Hawk on PS1. I also did own Tony Hawk 1 at one point, although I actually got it for my birthday. One of my friends gave it to me for my 9th birthday. But I later traded that in. But this definitely improved upon that. All the different levels were very memorable, from the air base, the school, but definitely a lot of fun. And then you could unlock Spider-Man. As a hidden, Spider-Man was in this game. Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour. That is quite the mouthful. I had rented this a couple times at Blockbuster after it had come. Well, it would have been over a year after it, well over a year after it had come out. Since it came out in 2000, we didn't get the PS2 until Christmas of 2001. This came out around the same time as Mickey Speedway USA on the Nintendo 64. The big draw of this one, though, was that it didn't have any of the same playable characters as Mickey Speedway USA. So, like Mickey, this did not feature any of those characters. None of the characters playable in this were in Mickey Speedway USA. That might have been an agreement between the companies that produced those respective games. I will say Mickey Speedway USA, gameplay-wise, is a superior game. But me personally, I enjoy this one more because it actually takes place in Disney World. All the racing tracks are based off of various attractions at Disney World. Like you have Space Mountain, you have Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, you have Splash Mountain, you have the Haunted Mansion, you have the Dinosaur Ride, Rock and Roller Coaster track. Just so many. This really was. Even though Mickey Speedway USA was a superior game, just gameplay mechanics wise, I personally enjoy this one a lot more, just because of all the Disney World rides. And my personal favorite track in this was the Haunted Mansion. And I finally did buy this off of Amazon a couple years ago. It definitely was worth the purchase because this is an absolutely fun game just to race through all your favorite Disney rides. Power Rangers Time Force. I had actually rented this once at Blockbuster when it had a little over a year. It just released. This game came out towards the end of Time Force's run on television. But I remember playing this. I never really got into it when I rented it. Part of it was because back then video game rentals at Blockbuster were only like 5-day rentals as opposed to 7-day later on. But I never really got into it, didn't really have enough time to get into it. Never rented it again. But I finally did find a copy of this. This particular copy I bought at MagFest in 2015. If you've ever been to MagFest, they have a marketplace. They sell a lot of classic games, and I bought this because I was figured what the hell, it was only $5, only to come to find out when I come home and I pop this into the PS1, oh my god, this game is a piece of shit. It really is. this game is torture. I thought this would have been superior to the Lightspeed Rescue game on the Nintendo 64. But this game is broken. I mean, it is virtually unplayable. So like, don't even bother with this game. If you're a Power Rangers fan, do not bother playing any of the don't bother with any of the games that came out after the Genesis Super Nintendo era. Because from what I've played of those games, the Super Nintendo and Genesis Power Rangers games are actually pretty good, but games like these on like the PS1 Nintendo 64 or Dino Thunder on the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox, those are not fun. Those just aren't fun games. So I didn't really play a lot of PS1 specific games. There were some games that I rented, like I remember renting Spyro 3 once, but like obviously after a certain point, Blockbuster stopped allowing rentals for PS1 and Nintendo 64 games and focused on just rentals for Xbox, PS2, GameCube games. So we were kind of out of luck there. Although I do remember renting Mega Man X4 and I borrowed Mega Man X4 from one of my friends, and then I rented X6 at one point. But I never repurchased those because I've got both of those on my Mega Man X collection on the GameCube. Finally, around near the end of 2008, I was getting interested in buying classic games. So one of the games I ordered off of eBay near the end of 2008 was Final Fantasy IX. This was when I was starting to get into the Final Fantasy series. I have not played this in a long time, but from what I played of it, this was really fun. Gotta love Vivi. Vivi is the absolute best character in this game. Just the cast in general, from Zidane to Garnet to Steiner to Freya to Quina, all really great, likable characters in the Tantalus troupe. Unfortunately, I only got a little bit into. I completed the first disc and got a little bit into disc 2, but I never picked it up again. But this is definitely something I will play again whenever I get the chance. And the next one, this was a huge game that had a huge impact on the gaming industry as a whole. I had wanted to buy back when I was first getting into Final Fantasy and wanting to purchase classic games. I was looking for this on eBay, but like I could never find a copy that was under like $70. At the time, this game was going for high prices on eBay and Amazon. But finally, I managed to find a copy of this game for $60 in perfect condition, mind you. It was in perfect condition at a half-price books, and that game, Final Fantasy VII. This game is incredible. At the time, a lot of people were starting to say it was overrated. It is not my favorite Final Fantasy game, but it's definitely up there. This game definitely deserves the acclaim that it got at the time and still gets. This game had a huge impact on the gaming industry. It was a huge shock at the time when Final Fantasy jumped ship from Nintendo to PlayStation, because it was one of those series, like it was Final Fantasy, Castlevania, and Mega Man, the three biggest third-party franchises on Nintendo systems during the NES and Super Nintendo era, all jumped ship to PlayStation. The biggest effect was Final Fantasy, because like at least with the Nintendo 64, they still got Mega Man 64, and they still got a couple Castlevania games, but there was no Final Fantasy game ever released on a Nintendo console for over 8 years. After Final Fantasy VI, you didn't see another Final Fantasy game until Crystal Chronicles on the GameCube in 2003, I want to say. But yeah, this was an incredible game. It made JRPGs mainstream. Had Final Fantasy VII not been the success it was, we probably wouldn't have gotten Legend of Dragoon localized. We probably wouldn't have gotten Xenogears localized. We wouldn't have gotten a lot of these great JRPGs in the late 90s and early 2000s localized to the United States. So, of course, found this at a half-price books. I think I was on spring break of my freshman year of high school at half-price books. in perfect condition for $60, which was a steal at the time. Of course, played this. Did several playthroughs of this, but I never beat it. Although I finally beat the game back in November after owning this game for 7 years, 7.5 years. Finally beat the game. I will say it is an incredible game. I will say it kind of. I will say the first half of the. I really like the story in the first half of the game, but it kind of meanders around for a little, but then things pick up again towards the end. But I will say I prefer Final Fantasy VI. 6 is my favorite game in the series. Though one of the things that 7 does much better than 6 on is just each town, each city is very distinctive. Midgar, very distinctive. Nibelheim, very distinctive. Each town is very distinctive from one another. Like, whereas Final Fantasy VI, it's like most of the towns kind of blend in with each other. But that wasn't because of a lack of creativity. That was more just because of technical limitations at the time. And Final Fantasy VII took the new technology to its full potential of what was available at the time. Really looking forward to the Final Fantasy VII remake whenever it finally does come out. Unfortunately, it seems like there's some development troubles going on, but definitely looking forward to it. But this is definitely just an incredible game. Huge impact on the industry. As I was talking earlier about Final Fantasy VI being my favorite Final Fantasy game, here is Final Fantasy Anthology. Bought this at this place called The Exchange a couple years ago. And Final Fantasy Anthology includes both Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI. It was the first time Final Fantasy V was ever localized. Final Fantasy VI I have played it via emulator, the Super Nintendo version. When it was Final Fantasy III, beat the Super Nintendo version, did another playthrough back in the fall and beat it again. Final Fantasy VI is my absolute favorite Final Fantasy game of all time. Great cast. The gameplay system is my absolute favorite in the series. I feel like each playable character brings something to the table, whether it be Terra's Esper abilities and more powerful magic, Celeste's abilities with superior abilities with magic, and her ability to absorb magic, Locke's thievery, Edgar's tools, Sabin's blitzes, Setzer's slot machine attack, or just a great cast, great storyline, the best villain of all time in the form of Kefka Palazzo. I would really love to see a remake of Final Fantasy VI. Don't know if that'll ever happen. I guess that depends on the success of the Final Fantasy VII remake. But enough of me gushing about 6. Final Fantasy V, I think, is the most underrated game in the series. It's definitely up there for me. I really love the job system. I can see where some people... I mean, the storyline doesn't take as much of a forefront because they focus a lot more on just the gameplay system. But it's definitely a very funny cast. Galuf is by far the best character in this game. Although Ferris is also really good. Bartz is pretty good. Lena's kind of bland. And Exdeath. Honestly, Exdeath is not the best villain, but it's still a very fun game. One of the more lighthearted storylines, one of the funnier stories, but like just very underrated. Not necessarily in the sense that it's a bad game. Most people like it. Most people like Final Fantasy V. It's just underrated in the sense that nobody ever really talks about it. 2 fantastic games in one package right here. On Ape Escape, on PS1. I had played Ape Escape 2 and 3 on the PS2 before, so I found this at MagFest the first year I went in 2014, and I bought this, and I actually was just playing this yesterday. I've never beaten it. I'm very close to beating it right now, but it's definitely. I will say Ape Escapes 2 and 3 are better than this. Just those two had more variety, just the atmospheres of those games and all the, especially Ape Escape 3. But like, still, this was a great starting point. The first game to really take advantage of the DualShock controller scheme. Very unconventional control scheme, but like I will say, the voice acting is not aged well. But that was very common for the time period. This is definitely a very fun game to play. Couldn't recommend it enough. A great starting point for a great series, which unfortunately has pretty much been discontinued. We didn't get a lot. We didn't get a lot of the later games in the series, so. But this was a fantastic game. Final Fantasy VIII. I bought this at MagFest in 2015. I actually did start a playthrough, got through a little bit of it right after I beat Final Fantasy VII, but I didn't really get much further into it. But from what I played, it's actually pretty fun. I don't mind the junctioning system, which was something a lot of people criticize. But I definitely have to give this another shot. Definitely get more into it, because this definitely seems like a really interesting game. Albeit kind of polarizing with the junctioning system, but in some sense, I mean, just among the core fan base, I mean, in general, the first 10 Final Fantasy games are all very well beloved by the general public, but I know the junctioning system is kind of debated, but definitely need to give this another shot. Croc. I bought this at MagFest either in 2015 or 2016. I don't really remember, but I actually remember I had a VHS of the Psycho Rangers saga of Power Rangers in Space, and the first thing they show before they get to the main program on the VHS is a commercial for Croc, which a lot of people say is one of those hidden gems on the PS1. Well, I finally got around to playing it like right after I got home from Poland, because one of my friends there, one of the people who was on the internship team, like we were talking about like the 3D platformers of the 90s, and I was talking about how like without Mario 64 we probably wouldn't have gotten Spyro and Crash, Bandicoot, and Croc. And once I mentioned Croc, he brings it, oh my god, I love that game. So I'm like, this is the first game I have to play when I get home. I get around to playing it. This game has not aged well. I don't like the way this game controls. Like, I just have not been able to get into it. So I'm sorry for those of you who love this game, but I mean, I don't understand just how Croc controls it. It's not very playable for me. Soul Blade, or Soul Edge as it was originally known in Japan. Obviously, this was the start of the Soul Calibur series. I've never gotten around to playing it, but I imagine it must have been really good in order to spin off into an entire franchise, which sadly has since lost its mojo. So this is definitely something I gotta give a shot. Bought this at MagFest, I think in 2015. Qbert, bought this at MagFest in 2015, haven't played it yet. Spyro the Dragon, I remember I rented Spyro 3 well over a decade ago, but and that was fun. I've played a little bit of this, bought this at MagFest in 2015, I think. Yeah, I think it was 2015. Played a little bit of it. It's definitely a lot of fun, but I definitely need to get further into this. Beast Wars Transmetals. This is not the same as the Beast Wars Transmetals on Nintendo 64. This is more of the Nintendo 64 version is more of a 2D fighter, and in the same vein of like Virtua Fighter. This one is more of like a 3D party fighter, like in the same vein as Power Stone. Although this one obviously predates that. I played a little bit of it, bought this at MagFest 2016, I think, and I will say this game is not very good. It's just not. I mean, but the fighting game genre is just not what Beast Wars or Transformers is meant for. So anyways, it's just a shame. was really looking forward to playing this, and only to find that it kind of sucks. I mean, it's not like absolutely terrible, but it's just not very good. The following games: Tomb Raider, Tomb Raider 2, Air Combat, the PS1 port of Time Crisis, Jet Moto, and Legend of Dragoon. This is the last of my PS1 collection. I haven't actually played any of those, although I did play Time Crisis in the arcade years ago. With the exception of Legend of Dragoon, which I ordered off of Amazon like a year ago. Everything else I've bought at either MagFest 2015 or 2016. I haven't played any of those. Haven't had a chance to play any of those. But those are in my collection. On to my PS2 collection. Now, my PS2 collection is even smaller. The thing with the PS2 was that I was not really a PS2 kid. My brother was the one who got most of his games on PS2. I didn't really get into any of the PS2 exclusives at the time. Never got into I didn't get into Ratchet and Clank at the time, or Jak and Daxter at the time, or Sly Cooper at the time. I do have the PS3 HD collections of the Ratchet and Clank Classic Trilogy, the Jak and Daxter Trilogy, and the Sly Cooper Trilogy on PS3. I have the HD collections for those series. I have played all three of the Ratchet and Clank games on the Ratchet and Clank collection, but like obviously I'll get to that whenever I do my PS3 collection. But it was, as I established earlier in this video, before I went on to my PS1 games, the first game I ever owned personally on PS2, which I got for Christmas in 2001, was Test Drive Off-Road Wide Open. But the first game I personally ever got into that was PS2 exclusive was the one and only. It's part of the name basis for my username, Kingdom Hearts. I was 9 years old when this game came out. I remember first seeing the commercials, and I saw all my favorite Disney characters in one game. I'm like, oh my god, I have to get this game. The first time I ever played it, I actually borrowed it from my neighbor across the street and played it for a little bit. Unfortunately, never got off of Destiny Islands. But finally, I did rent it once, and I was hooked. I was hooked on this game. I fell in love with this series. I've played through this game at least 7 times. Whether it be this version or this PS2 version or the version I have on the PS3, and I got addicted to this game. The HD, I got addicted to this game. I would play this game like at least 5 hours a day, and of course the rent expired. Well, my dad finally did get the game for me, although I did have to pay him back on that. But my mom made it a rule. Now, Andy, now that you have this game, you're only allowed to play for 45 minutes a day because you got addicted to this game when you rented it. So I eventually did beat the game for the first time, and it had a huge effect. I just remember being like, oh my god, this game was so amazing. Can't wait for Kingdom Hearts 2. And of course, we had to wait for Kingdom Hearts 2. Which I'll get to later in this video. But man, I fell in love with the series. Sora was like such a great protagonist in this game, and his relationship with Riku and his relationship with Kairi, and their just strong friendship that's put to the test, and just all the twists and turns that this game takes. Like, it turns out, like, I guess I won't spoil it for you, although I'm sure most of you know the real story of who the true main villain is. But man, that threw me for a loop when I learned that. I mean, this is just an incredible game. Now, obviously, this is not the original copy I own. This is the greatest hits copy. So the original copy that my dad bought for me, I actually lost that somewhere around the house. So after Kingdom Hearts 2 came out and I played through that, I wanted to play through the original again. So I found this hits copy at a GameStop, and I eventually did find the original copy. Um, I don't remember what happened to it after that. I either gave it to one of my friends or I traded it in. I don't remember which. Um, but yeah, was an incredible start to an incredible series. The Simpsons Road Rage. This was the Simpson. This was pretty much a ripoff of Crazy Taxi, except with Simpsons characters. I first borrowed this from a friend, but then we later got our own copy. Now, this is not my original copy. My original copy actually broke. See, my brother and I were not, more specifically my younger brother, he was not exactly responsible with his games and taking care of them. Um, Obviously, a lot of the time he wouldn't put his games away back in the cases. He would just like, if he was gonna switch a game out in the console, he would just take the disc out, and if he couldn't find the case, he would just put it upside down, laying out, and most of the time that didn't really affect anything. But with this, I later find the disc for this game split in half. Eventually rebought this. I think I got this at Magfest 2016. Now technically it's not a great game. It's a very okay game. But I mean it's got Simpsons characters. It's Crazy Taxi with Simpsons characters. Still a lot of fun. Was actually playing it a couple weeks ago. Still a lot of fun. It's just so much fun. If you're a huge Simpsons fan, this is definitely a great game. A lot of great jokes. A lot of stuff, like when I was playing this again a couple weeks ago, there were a lot of stuff that I caught on to that I didn't notice when I was first playing this when I was like 10 years old. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. Now, we had never originally owned this. We had rented this a couple times. I remember the first time my brother rented it. I come home from, I was in Cub Scouts. I come home from, no, I don't think it was Camp Belzer. I came home from, we had gone on a camping trip. My Cub Scout pack had gone on a camping trip to a state park one weekend. So we come back, and then I come out. I'm really tired, so I end up taking a 2-hour nap, and then I wake up and find out that my brother has rented Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. So we enjoyed the hell out of this game. This was just a very incredible game. Among the first 4 Tony Hawk's game, it was definitely the best one. The games just kept getting better and better and better with each successive installment. The last one to use the traditional Tony Hawk game formula, although it actually did switch things up a bit. Instead of if you were in career mode, instead of it being you have 2 minutes on a certain level, you have 2 minutes to complete all these objectives on a certain level. Instead, it's like you talk to individual NPCs to activate challenges and objectives. And it was like much more open world. Like I remember the different tracks, the different skate tracks in this game. They felt much bigger. They were much bigger in this game compared to the first compared to the first 2 at least. I don't really remember Tony Hawk PS2 version of Tony Hawk 3, but Tony Hawk 4, like the levels were much bigger. This definitely was the last one to have, I think, all of the skaters that everyone knew, like Bob Burnquist, Steve Caballero, Kareem Campbell. A lot of them were cut in Tony Hawk Underground and Underground 2. Ape Escape 2. I talked about Ape Escape. This was actually the first Ape Escape game I ever played. Rented this in 2003. I remember seeing an ad for this in Electronic Gaming Monthly. So of course I rented it. A very fun game. Compared to Ape Escape 1, the first Ape Escape had a time travel theme. This one had a world tour theme, so you would go to all these different levels based on different countries. Like there was a level based on Italy, the one I remember most. I finally bought this copy off of Amazon a couple years ago. Although I haven't gotten around to playing it yet. I'll get to it soon once I beat Ape Escape 1. Tony Hawk's Underground. This was the first Tony Hawk game that wasn't part. I mean, this really changed the formula. In career mode, it was, instead of it being you play as a pro skater, you instead create your own character and play through their career, and it's a great storyline. Just like a guy that you're playing as a skater down on his or her luck. This was just a great game. I felt like this in Underground 2 were really. I feel like with the Tony Hawk series, I also have Underground 2, what's my brother's game, so that's why I'm not including it in this collection. But this and Underground 2, I mean, those were both really good games. I thought this was definitely better because it was more about actually becoming a pro skater, and whilst the second one was just a bunch of goofiness and a bunch of BSing. I kind of established this in one of my previous collection videos where I talked about how Mario Party suffered from Tony Hawk syndrome. I feel like with the Tony Hawk series, the four pro skater games and the 2 underground games were great, but like American Wasteland onward, Tony Hawk got progressively worse and worse and worse, and it became a shell of its former self. But like this was definitely the pinnacle of a great series. Soul Calibur 3, I bought this when it came out. In my opinion, this is just not necessarily with the fighting mechanics, but just with like in terms of just the amount of content, the amount of variety there it is to it. I feel like Soul Calibur 3 is the absolute best game in the franchise. I loved Chronicles of the Sword. Never actually beat Chronicles of the Sword, but it was a great secondary mode. I really prefer the character creation in this game compared to Soul Calibur 4 and 5, because with Soul Calibur 3, the character creation system, like, Namco actually developed, instead of how with Soul Calibur 4 and 5, when you just give your character the moveset of another already existing character and just making them making them clones of other characters. With Soul Calibur 3, they actually created new movesets for the various classes. Like, there was a Sword and Shield mode, which had its own moveset separate from... That wasn't just a copy-paste of Sophidia's moveset or Cassandra's moveset. The Iron Sword moveset was its own moveset, and it wasn't just a copy of Siegfried and Nightmare's movesets, or the Grieve Edge moveset, which wasn't based on any character, didn't have any similarities to any character. It was just, I felt like with the character creation system, you were actually creating brand new characters with their own movesets. They weren't just clones of other characters. And it just felt much more fleshed out in those games in Soul Calibur 3. Whereas the Soul Calibur 4, I mean, it's kind of cool. You can actually create other characters from other fandoms, like it's easy to create like Zelda characters or Fire Emblem characters in Soul Calibur 4 and 5, but 3 just felt much more fleshed out with the character creation system. You actually have movesets created specifically for custom characters instead of just having them be clones of already existing characters. And this game was just so incredible. I thought the storyline in this game was a lot better. Just the individual storylines for each characters. I loved Zos Alamel. He was a great addition. Setsuka and Tira were great additions to the game. Olkadon, probably my favorite mimic character in the series, as well as other ones like the Siegfried story was great. And his redemption. This was just an incredible game in terms of content. From what I understand, technically Soul Calibur 4 and Soul Calibur 2 are superior fighting games. Like, a lot of people were critical of the fighting system in the game, but just for me personally, just with all the content that was there, I really just love this game. It's my favorite in the series. And now we get to one of my most anticipated games ever, Kingdom Hearts 2. I remember beating the first Kingdom Hearts game, falling in love with it, and I was like, can't wait for Kingdom Hearts 2. There's just so many plot threads that are left over from one. Like, how is Sora gonna get home? So then Kingdom Hearts 2 gets announced mid 2003, and I find out about it in Electronic Gaming Monthly towards around, like, I think around November 2003 was when I first learned of this game's production. And I remember waiting and waiting and waiting, and I was like, I would religiously follow coverage of the game, finding out about which new worlds we're gonna be in, finding out about the Mulan world and the Beauty and the Beast world, and I remember getting so excited for the Lion King world since that is my favorite Disney movie. Kingdom Hearts 2. So the interesting thing about the launch of this game, it was set. It released March 28th, 2006. We're waiting for this game. There were all these prospective release dates. It actually never got delayed. What happened was like all the potential release dates, those were just speculation. Like, first people were speculating holiday season 2004, then January 2005, then fall September 2005, then holiday 2005, and then the official release date gets announced for Japan gets it December 2005. We get it at the end of March of 2006. I mean, but man, this game was definitely worth the wait. The interesting thing, though, about the launch of this game, even though the official launch date was March 28th, most people didn't get it until the next day or a few days later. What happened was, so I live in Indiana, so we're on the East Coast, so like, so presumably the first copies of the games are shipped. They arrive in California. Well, what happens is a lot of store. My dad goes to get. He goes ahead and I already paid. I mean, I'm still paying for it with my own money, but my dad's the one who's picking it up. So after work, the day it's supposed to come out, my dad's looking. My dad immediately goes to Blockbuster to get the game, but only to find out, I'm sorry, we're sorry, but we're not receiving any copies until April 1st. And he's like, oh man, my son is going to be so disappointed. And then one guy turns to him, and he's like, dude, you're not the only one disappointed. I've been waiting for this game for 3 years. So then my dad goes over to Toys R Us. We're not getting they don't have any copies available. He goes to Walmart. We're not getting any copies till April 1st. So most stores aren't getting any, in my area, aren't getting any copies until April 1st. But luckily, the next day, Toys R Us gets a bunch of copies of the game, like a truckload of copies of the game, like March 29th. So I ended up not getting this until the day after launch day. But still, man, this was worth the wait. And perfect timing, because this came, for me, this was right before my spring break. I was in 6th grade. So like I spent the entire 6th grade playing this game. It was well worth the wait. A little too easy though, like difficulty wise, but man, the story was even better. The Organization 13, great group of villains. Axel was the breakout character. This is my favorite game in the series. Just the only drawback is that it's just the difficulty. But like Kingdom Hearts 2 was just, the gameplay was more polished. The worlds look even better. Like they're much more stylized. Look a lot more like they came straight out of a Disney movie. Instead of going for the kind of photorealism that Kingdom Hearts 1 was going for. Man, this was just an incredible game. And although I haven't played this as much as I think I've played through this game probably about 5 times at least, whereas the first one I've played at least 7 times. But man, this was I could go on and on about this game, and I've been waiting for well over a decade for Kingdom Hearts 3. Although I don't think the wait for that's going to be much longer. They just revealed a new trailer for. It technically wasn't for E3, but it was for the orchestra event that was going on during E3. So, and the game looks incredible. The graphics look like they have improved tremendously. The lighting effects. I am so pumped for Kingdom Hearts 3. So pumped for July 15th. when we get the new world reveal, and it looks like we're going to get the release date announced. So I'm really looking forward to that. But enough of me about Kingdom Hearts 3. Let's move on to the next game. Ape Escape 3. I rented this around 2006 when this came to the United States. And it was like right around my summer between 6th and 7th grade. But man, I loved this game. Even better than Ape Escape 2. This one had a movie theme, so there were a lot of movie and TV parodies. Like there's parodies of Star Wars, there's parodies of Spider-Man, there's parodies of like just so much. There's parodies of Friday the 13th. I mean, this just catching all the parodies and references to movies and all the different transformations that your characters, because there's two different main protagonists. There's the boy Kay and the girl Yumi. So much variety to this game, all the different transformations that are available to you. Just the movie theme had me hooked on it. So, but I didn't actually buy this game until I got it off of Amazon 2 years ago, along with Ape Escape 2. But man, I really would love to get back to this soon. Dance Factory. My brother got this in the midst of the whole Dance Dance Revolution craze. The big hook of this game was that you could insert any CD and it would create a dance, whatever for it. It would generate dance moves so you could put in any music CD and it would generate dance gameplay for each song on the CD. The problem was that the dance moves that would generate wouldn't exactly fit with the melodies of the songs. So, but I mean I definitely did get some gameplay out of this, although definitely not as good as Dance Dance Revolution. Guitar Hero 2, obviously my brother got this for Christmas in 2006. First Guitar Hero game I ever played. But yeah, this was definitely a great game. Definitely played a huge part in the whole rhythm gaming craze that went on during the late 2000s, which then got oversaturated, and then pretty much it ended. The Guitar Hero series was discontinued for a while, and then Rock Band is pretty much dead now. But Guitar Hero 2 was still a fantastic game. Really loved playing it. It was a lot of fun. Introduced me to a lot of great rock songs. Guitar Hero 2 was the last game that we had on the PS2 during its main life cycle before the Wii and PS3 came out. Although Sony was still supporting the PS2 for well into 2008, because the PS3 took a while to really gain traction. But obviously I've still bought a few PS2 games and played quite a few PS2 games. So the first of which, Final Fantasy X, bought this around the fall of 2008 during my freshman year of high school. This was when I was first getting into Final Fantasy. Technically, I have not beaten this game. I've come very close. I got to what was technically like the true final boss, which was Jack in his final Aeon form, but I never actually beat him. Never got to the ending, but I really enjoyed the leveling system. I thought I would hate the sphere grid system, but I loved it. It made a lot of sense. Really liked the storyline of this game. The voice acting, in some cases, kind of awkward, but compared to what was the voice acting for most games at the time, this was definitely one of the better games. This and Kingdom Hearts 1 had great voice acting compared to other games that were around during its era. This was really the last universally beloved Final Fantasy game. Final Fantasy 11 was an MMO, so obviously that wasn't available to everyone. Final Fantasy 12, very polarizing. Final Fantasy 12 was one of those games where you either loved it or you hated it. Like, the people who support the game, they absolutely love Final Fantasy 12. They think it's like one of the best games in the franchise. Well, the other half absolutely hates the game. And then Final Fantasy 13, we all know the story with that game, and that's one's not really polarizing. I don't really know anyone who absolutely loves Final Fantasy 13 or its sequels, but I know plenty of people who absolutely hate the crap out of those games. Final Fantasy X, definitely a great game, a great storyline, really has you questioning a lot about, well, it has a lot of social commentary, particularly towards organized religion, and it's definitely had an effect on my life, on my belief system. Orin was a great mentor. Titus, I mean, yeah, he was kind of annoying, but he still grows a lot in the game. Lulu's a great character. Waka is kind of comes off as kind of a religious blowhard at the beginning of the game, but of course he develops a lot. Riku is a great character. Yuna kind of bland, but still, I mean, still a decent character. And Kamari, the Silent Warrior, just a great setting. Spira is still to this day, even though this was a very early PS2 game, this was still had very high quality graphics, even compared to the games that were available on the PS2 at the time. One of the best looking on PS2 games still, even with games that came out later. Square Enix really took advantage of the PS2's hardware, especially with Final Fantasy XII as well. Like Final Fantasy XII looked like it could have easily been on the PS3 if you didn't know it was on the PS2. But yeah, still fantastic game. Couldn't recommend it enough. Star Wars Starfighter and Star Wars Jedi Starfighter. I played a little bit of the first Starfighter. Bought both of these at MagFest 2016. Played a little bit of Starfighter. The reason I got both of these, I absolutely love Star Wars Rogue Squadron. 1 on GameCube, on Nintendo 64, and then 2 on the GameCube. Played a little bit of 3 on the GameCube. Although 3 has those kind of shitty on foot missions. I will say still, Rogue Squadron series is still way better than Starfighter. I don't really like the gameplay mechanics that much, but it's still a good vehicle-based Star Wars game. I mean, you can't get enough of those. I mean, those are seldom seen these days. Haven't played Jedi Starfighter at all, but I mean, I would presume it's pretty similar. Ark of the Lad, Twilight of the Spirits. I bought this off of Amazon a couple years ago. After watching Magus X1 streaming it one day. Never actually played it though, but this is the last PS2 game I have. Unfortunately, I never really got the full PS2 experience when it was around. I mean, the PS2 was the system my brother really played way more, while I was way more into the GameCube. The GameCube was where I got all my multi-platforms, all my exclusives, whereas PS2, the only games I really played at the time, religiously were really the Kingdom Hearts games, the Ape Escape games, even though I never owned those, the Tony Hawk games. Like, most of the games I played on PS2 were games that I would rent. I rarely ever bought a game on the PS2. But yeah, I definitely have good memories, definitely catching back up with, I'm definitely glad that they re-released a lot of the PS2 games on PS3, like the Ratchet and Clank trilogy, the Jackson Daxter trilogy, Sly Cooper trilogy, re-released those on PS3. There's definitely a lot of must-have PS2 games that I haven't played at all. I mean, the PS2, to this day, the PS2 is the best-selling home console of all time. It sold over 150 million units, even more than the Wii. The Wii only sold about a little over 100,000 units during its lifetime. But obviously, it also led to Sony getting kind of cocky during the beginning of the following generation when they released the PS3. But obviously, I'll get more into that when I do my PS3 collection video. But the PS2 truly was a great console. Had so many great games. I mean, on the PS2, there was something for everybody. I mean, if you were someone who liked platform action games and platformers, there was Jak and Daxter and there was Ratchet and Clank and Sly Cooper. If you were someone who liked RPGs, there was the Final Fantasy games, there was the Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, there was A lot of great RPGs. There were plenty of racing games, there was plenty of sports games. Even though the PS2 was the least powerful between the three consoles, I mean, the GameCube and Xbox both blew the PS2 out of the water when it came to graphical capabilities. The PS2, because it had way more games, way more variety, and also because it could play DVDs. The Xbox could also play DVDs, but you also had to have like a certain add-on to in order to play DVDs on the Xbox. Whereas with the PS2, all you needed was the PS2, and it was like DVDs were way more accessible on PS2. That was really what got the PS2 rolling early on before all the really great all the really great games came out, like Grand Theft Auto 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Even though that was a multi-platform, the PS2 version was definitely the definitive version. 2001 was really when Sony started hitting it out of the ballpark with the games that it was getting. Man, it was truly a revolutionary console, just with the variety of games that were available on the system. But anyways, that's it for and with the PS1 as well, with the PS1 collection. PS1 had just about everything. It had RPGs with the three Final Fantasy games that were on there, and Legend of Dragoon, Xenogears, so many great JRPGs. It also had a handful of platformers like the Spyro series, the Crash Bandicoot series, the the first two Rayman games. Can't remember if Rayman 3 was a PS2 or PS1. The PS1 and PS2, just Sony has always done a great job with the exclusive. There's always something with each. I mean, Sony has made four great consoles, four very successful consoles. I have mad respect for Sony in the game, at least in the game department. I don't exactly have respect for them in the film department, but I mean, that's another topic for another day. But anyways, that was my PS1 and PS2 collection, and this is KHI Masters signing off.